Welcome to the Big Game Hunting Podcast, where we help hunters like you prepare for the big game hunting adventures you've always dreamed of. Now, here's your host, John McAdams.
Hello, John McAdams here. Welcome to episode 310 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. I have another Monday morning bonus episode surprise for you today, where I talk about developments that have occurred with the 7mm PRC since Hornady first officially unveiled that cartridge back in October of 22. I'll also talk a little bit about some of my personal experiences with the cartridge over the course of the past year, to include a hunt I took that rifle on just last week, and we'll also discuss some of the recent issues and complaints that have cropped up regarding the cartridge in more recent months. Now, before we dive into the good, the bad, and the ugly regarding the 7mm PRC, the Big Game Hunting Podcast is about to celebrate its 5-year anniversary. In honor of crossing that milestone, we're giving away a hunt in Africa to a deserving military veteran, along with a literal pile of other amazing prizes for other podcast listeners. And yes, this giveaway is open to people from all over the world. Now, in addition to that hunt in Africa, I'm also giving away a Mossberg Patriot rifle, some Nosler trophy grade ammo, a Banish 30 from Silencer Central, a Meadowlark knife from Simbita Custom Knives, a set of Axel X-Core ear protection, some Spartan Precision bipods, and an autographed copy of The Perfect Shot 2 by Kevin Robertson. Listeners residing outside the U.S. are not eligible to win the suppressor, rifle, or ammo, but they can potentially win everything else. The only caveat to that is Evan Simbita will ship his knife overseas to someone that wins it, but the winner just needs to pay the shipping costs for the knife. The knife itself is free, but you got to pay shipping. Everything else we'll take care of. So click the link in the show notes to sign up for the giveaway if you are not already signed up. Now, if you already signed up at that link, you may have received an email from me asking you to confirm that this is a valid email address. You got an email that said something like, thanks for subscribing, but I need to verify that this is a valid email address. Please click here to confirm. I don't blame you for being confused or suspicious, but that was me. Click that link and that email, if you still have it, to confirm your email address and to tell my email system you are a real person. Your entry in the giveaway is not complete until you do that. Now, in addition to doing that, you can get additional entries by reviewing the show and by tagging friends in my past and future Instagram posts about the giveaway. Details about the giveaway, to include how to nominate a deserving military veteran to receive the hunt in Africa, are in episode 306. So check it out for more information. There's also a link in the show notes to that episode. Okay, now let's talk about the latest stuff with the 7mm Precision Rifle Cartridge. We'll start with the good news, and then after that I'll move on to things with an ongoing controversy with the round, what I think is going on there, and the work I'm doing to investigate the situation. Now, Hornady officially announced the 7mm PRC in October of 2022. That round exploded in popularity in 2023. In fact, many rifle and ammo manufacturers have said the 7PRC is one of the most popular, if not the most popular cartridge in their whole catalog right now. It is almost unheard of for a cartridge to become that popular that quickly. Even the much loved and much hated 6.5 Creedmoor, as popular as it is at this instant, took a good 5 to 8 years to really catch on, and it was not a barn burner right out of the gate like the 7PRC. Now, one of the things that Hornady just got right, did a great job with the 7PRC, is ammo and rifle availability straight off the bat. So straight out of the gate, for ammo options, you had the Hornady Precision Hunter line with the 175 grain ELDX and the Hornady Outfitter line with a 160 grain CX bullet. And then soon after that, other companies started picking it up as well. Federal also makes factory ammo with that 175 grain ELDX. Exact same bullet as Hornady uses in their ammo, but Federal offers it in a factory ammo line too. Federal also produces 7PRC ammo in their Terminal Ascent line. Initially, they cranked out a bunch of ammo with 155 grain Terminal Ascent bullet. That's the same bullet they use in the 7mm Rim Mag Terminal Ascent ammo. Now they have a 170 grain Terminal Ascent bullet that they use in that lineup. They made that bullet especially for the 7PRC, so it's bigger, heavier, has a higher BC than the 155 grain. Not going quite as fast, but still just a really, really good, tough bullet offering that a lot of people like because it is tougher for work up close than is the case, say, with the ELDX, but it is still really accurate, has a really good BC, and also gives good downrange performance like the ELDX. It may not be quite as good as the ELDX in those areas, but like I said, it's better than the ELDX up close. So it's really kind of what your priorities are with that sort of thing. And if your rifle shoots one better than the other, well, it's always nice to have more options with that too. Nosler also recently, like at the 2024 SHOT Show, or right, I guess just before the SHOT Show this year, they announced that they are picking up the 7 PRC. They offer it in their trophy grade long range line with 175 grain Accubon long range bullet. That's the same bullet that they previously offered, and they still continue to offer in the 28 Nosler. Now, as far as I know, that's the only 7 PRC dedicated hunting ammo actually available right now. You can get stuff from places like Hendershots and Choice Ammunition and whatnot with some of those bullets and with some different bullets, but that's all the mainstream stuff. Now, there have been a couple of other loads that have been announced, but I haven't actually seen on shelves yet. You got a core-locked tipped offering from Remington, along with their new cut or CUT offering. So the CX from Hornady is a lead-free offering. Same thing with this CUT or cut bullet from Remington. Remington also has announced a load in their Premier long range line, and Federal has also announced a loading in their new tipped fusion line for the 7 PRC. It's also well known that Barnes is working on a 7mm PRC factory load. They have not officially announced it as I record this. So we got a lot of options with more kind of coming down the road here real soon. Similar deal with rifles. They started strong out of the gate. That has continued to improve. I just checked as I recorded this, 56 rifle options from Sportsman's Warehouse right now. Christensen Arms, for instance, make 7 PRC in the Ridgeline, Mesa, and Modern Precision rifle lines. Bergara jumped on the train too with the B-14 Crest, Wilderness HMR, and their Ridge rifle Browning X-Bolt. You can even get one from Mossberg and their Patriot Predator rifle. So that's probably the least expensive 7 PRC rifle that you can get on the market right now. You can also get a Remington 700 in it. Ruger American, both in the old Ruger American model and the new Gen 2 model. They also just announced this year, along with the Ruger American Gen 2, Ruger's also offering the 7 PRC in their Hawkeye FTW Hunter rifle. I have one of those rifles in 300 Win Mag, and it is great. I just love it. That rifle is just great to shoot. It fits me really well. It's not super duper accurate with any one thing, right? You're not shooting quarter or a half minute with anything, but it will shoot darn near a minute of angle or very close to it with almost any ammo that I've fed to it. And so I've done a lot of hunting with that rifle. I really like it. I'm really glad to see the 7 PRC added to that lineup as well. You can also get the 7 PRC in the Savage 110. They have a bunch of different variants of that rifle. Get it in a couple different rifles from Seekins Precision. Even Weatherby now offers their new 307 rifle in 7 PRC too. Options also continue to grow, so you've got a lot of good stuff at different price points, from pretty inexpensive rifles, say with that Ruger American and the Mossberg Patriot, all the way up to much more expensive stuff, multiple $1,000 rifles. Whatever wets your whistle with that. So I bought my 7 PRC rifle. Mine is a left-handed Christensen Arms Ridgeline FFT. I bought it almost exactly a year ago, spring of 2023, and I worked the heck out of that rifle as soon as I got it because I knew I was taking it to Africa. I was shooting once, maybe twice, or even 3 times a week, getting that rifle broken in, getting familiar with it, seeing what it liked, all of that stuff in advance of that hunt. And I put some rounds through that thing doing it. I broke in the barrel primarily with Hornady Precision Hunter ammo with the 175 grain ELDX, and then I hunted exclusively for a long time with the 160 grain CX bullet. To my way of thinking, that CX was just about perfect for the sort of hunting I was going to be doing in Africa, primarily bigger, tougher game, like blue wildebeest was one of the things on my radar, and in that part of South Africa where I was hunting, longer range shots were just not very likely there. Maybe there was a couple spots where you could get a 300 or 400 yard shot, but Situations like that were the exception more than the rule. And in almost every case where you could get a 3 or a 400-yard shot, it was almost always possible to get closer to. So I was looking at a lot of stuff, say from 50 to 150 yards, and I actually ended up shooting everything in Africa under 100 yards, between, say, 60 and 90, 95 yards, something like that. And so with all that stuff in mind, I was like, I think the CX is going to be better for me. Luckily for me, the CX shot well for me. The ELDX was wonderful. Now, I'm not going to go out and say I have a quarter minute or a half minute gun or any of that stuff, but I don't know that I ever shot a group with the Precision Hunter ammo, even a 5-shot group that was bigger than an inch, even when it was windy or any of that stuff. My rifle just ate it up and just shot it like crazy. The CX ammo shot a little bit worse, but still really good. Right around a minute of angle. And I was extremely happy with that, considering the sort of situations that I was going to be hunting under. So I took that stuff to Africa, and man, it just performed great. I did not recover any bullets, but that is also kind of what I expected with those bullets. Maybe if I would have gotten a stem to stern shot or vice versa on a big animal like a kudu or wildebeest, a gemsbok, zebra, eland, something like that, I probably would have recovered a bullet, even one of those tough CX bullets under those circumstances. But that's not how things panned out. Nothing I shot ran very far at all. And like that blue wildebeest just dropped straight in his tracks when I shot him. So I could not be more happy with that whole setup. It all shot great. Killed the heck out of everything that I shot over there. That rifle was very, very lightweight, easy to carry. Wonderful. That was one of the highlights of that trip, was how well that 7 PRC performed. I took that same rifle, shooting that same ammo on my hunt in New Mexico with my son later in the year. And once again, just a dream to carry, a lot of fun. That was a really good hunt. I'll put links to both of these podcasts where I talk about these hunts in a little bit more detail if you haven't listened to them yet. They'll be in the show notes. But that was a great hunt. I ended up shooting a mule deer buck at about 330 yards on that hunt. And man, when I hit him, boom, just went straight down, lights out. Very happy with that. Even 300 plus yards like that was still well within the performance capability of the 7 PRC, even with that lower BC and tougher CX bullet that slows down a little faster than the ELDX bullet and requires more impact velocity to really expand. Hornady recommends, I think, about 2,000 feet per second for that bullet to get optimal expansion out of it. And running the numbers on it, I was getting that velocity, in theory, according to the Hornady 4DOF and some of the ballistic calculators I looked at online, that CX load, once again, with my actual measured velocity out of that exact rifle, was staying above 2,000 feet per second out to like 670 yards or something. So I could have shot twice as far on that deer and still gotten really good expansion out of it. And that is kind of unusual with a lead-free bullet like that because, like I mentioned, they're not generally as aerodynamic as a high BC lead core bullet, so they slow down a little bit faster, and they're also tougher, and so they need more impact velocity. Like the ELDX will expand down to like 1,350 feet per second, something like that, a very low velocity. And so the CX, once again, about 2,000 feet per second, it's just the way physics work on that stuff is that your effective range with it, where the bullet is going to expand, is going to be a lot closer. Usually, though, that distance is still farther than what most people are going to be shooting at anyway. Case in point here with the 7 PRC. I think I ran the numbers on my 300 Win Mag with the 180 grain CX back in 2022, and I brought it out to Arizona as a backup rifle on that hunt, and I think it was staying above 2,000 feet per second out past, say, just past 500 yards. So about as far as I would want to be shooting anyway was about as far as that particular bullet would still be expanding. But anyway, that is one of the big selling points of the 7 PRC is you get really good accuracy out of it. You use high BC bullets that are going to retain energy, retain velocity really well, and give you at least the potential to take a shot at a little bit longer range than would be the case with something else. Now, like many listeners know, and like I've talked about in this podcast, there are some people that have concerns about the ELDX bullet up close, saying that it's too soft, it's going to expand too rapidly, it's going to make a mess out of whatever you shoot, it's not going to penetrate well, all those sort of things. I've had people that just swear up and down to me that bullet is like a glorified varmint bullet that no one has any business hunting with. You shoot a deer with it, it's going to explode on their shoulder. That has not been my experience with the ELDX, and I've done a fair bit of hunting with it. I don't love that bullet just because the situations that I typically hunt in are better suited to stuff like a tough CX bullet because it's at a little bit closer range like that where I just don't need the performance of the ELDX. But I have hunted with it before, and my pronghorn hunt back in 2022 is a classic example of it. It was just a perfect situation for that 143 grain ELDX, and it performed wonderfully. But I wanted to take the Pepsi challenge for myself and kind of see what the deal is with the ELDX and a really close range impact at high velocity like I would get out of the 7 PRC. So here recently I was on an exotic hunt out here in Texas. And I hunted at this place for black buck and for axis last September, and I just had bad luck when I was there. It was super duper hot, had a bad drought here. Situations were just kind of wonky, and I was seeing animals out there on this hunt, but I just could not get into position for a shot. I saw a shooter axis for like 10 seconds. He came out, left, never saw him again, that sort of thing, and didn't even really have time to judge him. He was out there so quickly. Saw a number of black buck out there. There was one that I was aiming at, had the safety off my rifle, just waiting for the go-ahead from the guide. But the way the black buck was standing, I had a great shot on him, but the guide couldn't see his horns to properly judge him. The black buck took a couple steps into an area where the guide could see his horns, gave me the go-ahead, but he had moved into a spot where a bush was obscuring his vitals, and I never got a shot at him again. So I hunted out there for a long weekend, and like I said, just had bad luck, but they brought me back this past weekend for another go at it. Situation was much different this time, much cooler weather. We've got a lot more rain. I was one of the first hunters of the year instead of one of the last. And I ended up getting on a real nice black buck first afternoon of the hunt. Shot this black buck just 50 yards away, strongly quartering to me. I wanted a situation where I was going to really put this bullet to the test. So short range impact, 7 PRC, decided to use the 175 grain ELDX like I mentioned. And so it was quartering to me like that, shot it straight through that shoulder blade. I mean, that black buck just collapsed like folding up a tent, just like you would expect. The bullet did exit. Left a massive wound, massive entry wound, just shredded the vitals of that black buck, which is also what I expected. But even under those conditions, where I had an impact velocity well in excess of 2,700 feet per second, straight through that shoulder blade, straight through the rib cage, got the vitals, and still exited out the rib cage on the other side, no problem at all. So that is the sort of situation where you would expect, if this is a bullet that quote unquote explodes when it hits a big game animal, that was going to happen. Definitely not the case. Now, like expected, though, I did lose quite a bit of meat. Basically, all the meat off of that front shoulder, or that left front shoulder that was facing me. I got a little bit of meat off, a little bit lower, further away from it, but a lot of bloodshot meat in the ribs around there and on the shoulder itself. So that is exactly what I expected was going to happen. But like I said, I was just more concerned with, one, making an ethical shot, and two, making a good example test case scenario of what you can expect out of this thing at closer range like that. It was about what I expected. I expected it to exit. I expected it to cause a lot of meat damage isolated to that front shoulder, and that's really what happened. I didn't lose any meat anywhere else on the body. Didn't blow the animal in half or anything like that. Left about a fist-sized wound in the rib cage, not in the actual shoulder itself, but in the rib cage. You lose a little bit of meat like that. There's also just not a lot of meat on that part of the animal. Lost some meat off the shoulder blade. But like I said, it did exit, and that animal just boom went down like that. Now, this is not the sort of situation that's going to be unique to the 7mm PRC either. You shoot an animal under those conditions at that shot angle with really any high-powered rifle cartridge, you're going to get pretty darn similar results. So even if you were using a similar cartridge, 7 Win Mag, 300 Win Mag, something like that in that power range, even if you were using a lead-free bullet like a Barnes or something, you're going to get a pretty spectacular result out of it, and you're going to lose a good chunk of meat around where that bullet hits. It's very different, say, if the animal was close to broadside or quartering and you slip it in behind the shoulder or something like that. You shoot it straight through the shoulder, it has devastating terminal effects on the animal, but you also lose a lot of the meat around it, unless it's something real low velocity, like a 30-30 or something, and you'll still lose some meat, just not as much. So that's part of the pros and cons of that sort of shot angle, but once again, also a good test case for really what the deal is with the ELDX at close range like that. Now, on the advice of Scott Spanton, who was on the podcast in episode 294 to talk about his hunt in Africa, I bought a trigger cam, and I used that to video this hunt. A trigger cam is basically a camera that you mount on your scope, and it does a pretty cool job of videoing exactly what you see through your scope when you have it turned on. I was set up in such a way, I was careful, turned it on, and so I got a good scope view video of this black buck. I will put that video on Patreon along with some of the pictures of the carcass afterwards that, like I've mentioned before, like I talked about in episode 308 with that hog hunt, some of the videos showing the carcass and the effects of the bullet and all that stuff that I can't really put on Instagram or on YouTube or any of that stuff. This video and those pictures of the black buck, they will be on Patreon if you want to check that stuff out and really see firsthand how it all went down. So that's all the good news with the 7 PRC. I've had really good results on a wide range of game, from stuff on the low end like impala and black buck and mule deer, really all deer-sized game, and blue wildebeest being bigger and tougher. I'm working on some stuff to get the opportunity to hunt some bigger game, but we'll just see how the draws and all that stuff work out. But I've been very, very happy with my 7 PRC to this point. I've had really good accuracy with all the ammo I've shot through it, and I've tested out darn near everything that's available at this point. It's been very reliable. I like the rifle a lot. It's easy to carry. It's also reliable. It shoots well, and it's just performed great on all of these hunts. So that's all the good news. Here is the bad news with the 7mm PRC. There's been some issues that have cropped up with it, and I've heard enough complaints about a couple of specific things that it's making me strongly suspect that there actually is something to some of these complaints, instead of just some people that maybe got a lemon rifle or some lemon ammo or just don't know what the heck they're talking about. So first off, any new cartridge, you're going to have some growing pains associated with it, especially with a cartridge like this, where it's not only a new cartridge, but you're building a bunch of new bullets with it too. And especially if it is a very high-end, high-performance cartridge like the 7 PRC that really relies on specialized components to provide that really good high-end performance, it's even more complicated. It's more difficult to do that than it is the case to make 30-30 ammo or 30-06 ammo or something like that. Not dumping on those cartridges or anything, but those are just much lower performance rounds that they're not operating at the edges like the 7 PRC is. And so they're just more forgiving in certain ways. The 7 PRC is better in some ways, but the other ones have their advantages too. So, for instance, the first big problem I became aware of was a batch of CX bullets that somehow slipped through Hornady's QC process last year and were just given terrible accuracy to people afield. This was a limited number of bullets. It might have just been one lot that went bad on them, but there was kind of a rash of complaints about, oh man, this outfitter ammo is just shooting like garbage for me. I actually had a friend that bought a 7 PRC on my advice last year. I was talking about one to hunt elk and all this stuff. I was like, well, try both the ELDX and the CX bullets. The CX is a lot tougher. If I was going to potentially get a shot at an elk at 100 yards or something like that, I would definitely rather that bullet than the ELDX. But you just got to see if it shoots well on your rifle. So he bought a couple of boxes, like I recommended, of the outfitter ammo, and he said it shot like garbage for him. So it was some of the worst groups he ever got, and was very frustrated by that experience, spending, upwards of $100 on this ammo, and it was giving him pretty miserable accuracy. Now, fortunately, the Precision Hunter ammo with the 175 ELDX bullet shot great for him. He used that in his elk hunt. It performed wonderfully on that elk, killed it with a single shot, went 30 feet afterwards. He was a very, very happy guy. But still, that was just kind of a weird thing that happened. And I know that happens in other cases too. Every company has problems like that from time to time with different types of bullets and different cartridges and all that. And sometimes you're just one of the unlucky people that it happens to. But from what I hear, Hornady fixed those problems pretty quickly, and everything that was made before that batch of CX bullets was fine, and everything that's been made after it was also fine. Maybe not given the same accuracy that you'd get with the ELDX bullet, but still really good. And that's been my personal experience with the CX bullet. Like I said, the ELDX shot better. CX, still pretty good though. But there's been another problem that's cropped up much more recently, and this one seems to be a little bit more widespread. There are some complaints about velocities, actual obtained velocities with 7mm PRC ammo. And I think it's with all the Hornady ammo, but most people are really focusing on the Precision Hunter ammo. This is actually the subject that I received the most hate about, and it just all kind of came out of nowhere here, say in the past 2 months. No one said anything about this for a long time, and now I'm just getting beat up over it all the time. Now, whenever I do a cartridge comparison on my blog, on the podcast, or on YouTube, I use the advertised velocity by the manufacturer for the specific loads that I use in it. And so I do that with the 7PRC just like I do with every other cartridge I've ever used in every single other cartridge comparison. But all of a sudden I started just getting people just blowing me up via email and comments and all of this stuff saying that I actually need to hit the range. I need to get off Hornady's marketing page, stop using their advertised velocities because it's a bunch of garbage. Nobody's actually getting those velocities. And that is puzzling to me because I've shot the 7PRC a lot. Now, I know lots of people shot it more than me, but I'm probably in the top 10% of shooters in terms of just the sheer number and variety of rounds I put down range with that cartridge. I have darn sure shot the 7PRC a lot more than a lot of the haters that all of a sudden started attacking me about it. So I was very confused by this. Now, every now and then you'll get one or two guys that say things like that I just chalk up to random jerks and I ignore them. Now, Hornady is also a very polarizing company. Now, at least in my interactions with other hunters and shooters, I very rarely encounter people who hate other companies like Remington, Barnes, Winchester, Federal, Nosler, whatever. Now, sometimes you get people that just love ammo from one of those companies, but even people who may really like, say, Federal ammo, for instance, or those who may prefer Winchester over Remington or vice versa, they don't seem to hate those other companies like a lot of people do with Hornady. Now, I've talked about a phenomenon I call CDS, or Creedmoor derangement syndrome, in the past, where just the very mention of the 6.5 Creedmoor will just set people off. Sometimes I'll write an article where I talk about it and people will just go bananas over it. I've even had it happen where I'll write an article and I don't even mention the 6.5 Creedmoor, and a guy will take issue with something I said in that article and then start talking about the 6.5 Creedmoor in this response rebuttal attacking me that had nothing to do with the 6.5 Creedmoor. It's just really bizarre, the sort of emotions that cartridge evokes in some people. Well, there are also some people that I think have HDS, or Hornady derangement syndrome, too. Sometimes CDS and HDS are linked as well, and a lot of people, if they have one, they have the other. So like I said, just interesting phenomenon I have observed with that. And for instance, say, it seems like even those that, just to take an example here of another new cartridge that Hornady did not make, people that don't like the 6.8 Western for whatever reason, they don't just get angry about it like they do with the 6.5 Creedmoor or the 7PRC. Some people, of course, really like the 6.8 Western. It's a great cartridge and all of that stuff. Like I said, it just doesn't evoke the negative emotions that Hornady and the 7PRC and all that stuff get. Now, additionally, and along those lines, I've also observed that some people who really just love a similar cartridge that the 7PRC, quote-unquote, outperforms really get mad about it, too. Now, that's not just limited to the 7PRC. Anytime anything new comes out, there is a tendency for people to attack it if they consider it an attack on their favorite cartridge, right? It's almost like that appearance of this new round as a personal attack on them. Now, specifically talking about the 7PRC here, I have observed this specific phenomenon a lot with people that really like the 6.8 Western, the 7 Rim Mag, and the 28 Nosler. And like I said, sometimes these people act like the appearance of this new round that may, quote unquote, may be better than their cartridge in some small way. The fact that it exists, they act like it's a personal attack on them, and so they get really upset about it. So that is a long roundabout way of saying that I initially reacted to some of these complaints that some people aired as either someone that had Hornady derangement syndrome, or they just loved a 7 Rim Mag rifle or a 6.8 Western or something, and they were upset that the 7 PRC had some advantages over their favorite cartridge and viewed that as an attack on them. But I have heard enough of these complaints here lately from a broad enough spectrum of people that I firmly believe that there is something to them. Now, to drill down into this a little bit more, the specific complaint I'm talking about right now is people saying that 7PRC factory ammo from Hornady is not delivering the velocities that Hornady advertises. And specifically, these people are saying that even if you shoot this ammo, specifically the Hornady Precision Hunter ammo that they're talking about most of the time, if you shoot that ammo in a 24-inch barrel, you're getting 2,800, 2,850 feet per second compared to 3,000 feet per second like Hornady advertises. Now, I personally chronograph almost everything that I shoot. This is partly because I'm just curious about it, but I also use a lot of this information in a lot of the work that I do. Now, that has been one of the unintended benefits of doing like all of this ballistic gel work that I do for Hunting Guns 101. I shoot a lot of different ammo and a bunch of different rifles and cartridges. And you see some interesting trends when you do that. Most ammo is actually a little bit slower than advertised in the real world. Usually this is because most people are using a rifle with a shorter barrel. Now, if you look on a box of ammo, it does not matter what company you are talking about, almost all the time, there's just a few exceptions to this, say like with the 300 Blackout, which they use a 16-inch barrel for, but almost everything else is advertised using a 24-inch rifle barrel. So yes, if you shoot ammo with an advertised velocity, just for instance, of 3,000 feet per second in a rifle with a 20 or a 22-inch rifle barrel, it's going to be a little slower than advertised. There's nothing wrong with the ammo. There's nothing wrong with your rifle. But even when I'm shooting factory ammo, advertised at a 24-inch barrel, if I shoot it in a shorter barrel, 22 inches is very common in a lot of the rifles I shoot in. Some in 24-inch barrels, but I shoot just in all kinds of stuff, say from 16 to 24 inches, but a lot of stuff in the 20 to 22-inch range. Even in those cases, I'm getting velocities that are usually in the ballpark of what I would consider appropriate when barrel length is considered. As an interesting aside here, I've noticed that Winchester ammo, almost regardless of the cartridge and almost regardless of the barrel length, is shooting faster than I would expect. On the other hand, Remington ammo shoots a little slower than I would expect. And like I said, I've noticed that multiple calibers, multiple bullet weights, multiple rifles. So just an interesting thing that I have observed. Now, Hornady is usually pretty good about being darn close to advertised. Either advertised, say if I'm using a 24-inch barrel like I had like with my 6.5 PRC, my 6.5 Creedmoor, stuff like that, or at least darn close in cases where I'm using a shorter barrel, or at least, once again, in the ballpark of what would be reasonable. Same thing with Federal ammo, and same thing with Nosler as well. Now, that is what I observed initially with both the ELDX and the CX ammo for the 7PRC. I was shooting that in my Christensen Arms Ridgeline with a 22-inch barrel. For both of those loads, Hornady advertises 3,000 feet per second muzzle velocity out of a 24-inch barrel. I was getting 2,950 feet per second from a 22-inch barrel for both loads. Now, if you use a very conservative estimate of 20 to 30 feet per second of additional velocity per inch of barrel, you go 2,950 feet per second at a 22-inch barrel, add 2 inches to it, you're right there at 3,000 feet per second. And that seemed to be confirmed by other writers, podcasters, YouTubers, all that sort of stuff when I was initially doing a lot of this stuff. Same thing with a lot of the listener feedback I was getting initially too. But here's the interesting thing though. That was in 2023 when I really dove into this stuff hardcore the first time. I measured all my velocities with that stuff when I was first getting started with the 7 PRC, and then whenever I would do a ballistic gel test with it, I would measure the velocities as well. But once it got to the point where I was getting the same darn velocity every time I'd shoot with it, if I was just going out to the range to practice before a hunt, say like I was with my mule deer hunt back in October, I wasn't, especially if I was shooting off of sticks or prone or things like that, I wasn't measuring the velocity of it. So I stopped measuring the velocity of it for a while, but I shot a couple hundred rounds through that rifle in the beginning, measuring the velocity of every single shot. I was very confident in it. Things changed in 2024, though. Now, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people were reporting velocities of 2,800 to 2,850 feet per second out of a 24-inch barrel compared to the 3,000 feet per second Hornady was advertising. Now, and people were really getting upset about it. So this was the issue that I was really getting beat up about. Like I said, I do all this work in 2023, produce a bunch of content about it. Nobody says anything to dispute any of my velocities initially. And then, say late winter, early spring 2024, all of a sudden, lots and lots of complaints about it. People saying I need to actually shoot the ammo. Their stuff is not actually getting 3,000 feet per second, all that stuff. Now, a slower velocity isn't an issue in and of itself. This is still a very high-performance rifle cartridge shooting a very efficient high BC bullet. And as long as you know the actual velocity that your rifle is shooting at, it is a simple matter to adjust just how much you need to dial for elevation at various ranges. Wind hold is a little more tricky, but you can still do it if you know your actual velocity. You do lose a little bit in your maximum effective range in terms of what your energy threshold is and what your velocity threshold is. It's going to be shorter if your muzzle velocity is slower. But once again, for most people, it's not going to be an issue. So this isn't that big of a problem in absolute terms, though it is a problem in absolute terms, no doubt. But it really starts to become an issue in relative terms. Now, the 7 PRC is providing a small benefit over several other cartridges in ballistic terms when performing as advertised. And so you get a small but a definite advantage with the 7 PRC over, say, the 7 Rim Mag and the 6.8 Western when both cartridges are performing as advertised. But if you chop off 150 or 200 feet per second off the 7 PRC and keep the 7 Rim Mag or the 6.8 Western, for example, at their full advertised velocities here, then that advantage the 7 PRC has over those other cartridges either shrinks or, depending on how much velocity we're talking about it losing, it can actually flip in favor of the 7 Rim Mag or the 6.8 Western. And, of course, people understandably get mad when a company advertises a certain sort of performance and the round actually isn't delivering that performance out in the real world. And so on one hand, I'm tempted to say, hey, let's not make a mountain out of a molehill here, right? They're still really close, even at the worst for the 7 PRC, that sort of thing. But I also understand how these are all big selling points for this cartridge. It's supposed to be giving you all these advantages and this performance thresholds and all of that stuff. And if it's not doing it, then why the heck should I buy this rifle? Very valid point. I definitely understand where you're coming from. So what is the deal? Why were things working in 2023 as advertised? And why are things different now? I'm investigating in more detail, but I have a hypothesis. I've done some testing and investigation. Like I said, initially, I'm not done yet, but the things that I have learned so far lead me to believe that Hornady had to change the powder that they are using in the 7mm PRC due to an ongoing and potentially worsening powder shortage brought on by a number of factors, one of which is the war in Ukraine. I'm 100% certain that Hornady used one type of powder. Some people have theories on exactly what type of powder it is. I'm not going to speculate on the exact powder it is, but they used a powder to do those initial loads in 2023. That powder is what they were getting great performance with. They were getting excellent accuracy, and they were getting velocities either at or very close to advertised with that powder. Due to this powder shortage that seems to be getting worse, they're not able to get that powder anymore. They have had to replace the powder that they use in the 7PRC with some other type of powder. Once again, people speculated what it is. I'm not going to do that. I just know that it is different, and I know it's not given the velocities that the old powder was getting, and it's definitely not what was advertised. Now, on the upshot, it seems like this new powder is still very temperature stable, very consistent, and is still giving great accuracy, but it's just not going as fast as the old stuff was. Now, there is a little bit more to it than just that, but I don't want to say anything else at this instant until I know for sure. I'm in the process of digging into this in a little bit more detail now, and I'm planning another podcast episode and a YouTube video soon with the final results of my experimentation. I've done a lot of the legwork on this topic already, but I'm not done. I want to wait till I have it all done together. Then I'm going to lay it all out for you at once after I make hopefully just one more trip to the range. And hopefully this is something that is just a minor bump on the road. Hornady is going to be able to get that old powder that they were using on those initial 7PRC loads, and then current production stuff for the 7PRC will be performing as advertised, and this, like I said, just be a bump in the road that people forget about in a couple years, and that will be the end of it. But in the meantime, this is very frustrating to me and to everyone else that's having to deal with it. So we're going to do the best we can with it. I'm going to finish up this project and get some results to you here as soon as I can. With this in mind, I would appreciate any feedback podcast listeners have regarding the 7mm PRC. If you have one, what do you think of it? Have you measured the velocity of any 7mm PRC factory ammo from Hornady? If so, would you send me the details? I need to know what velocity you actually measured, approximately when you shot this ammo, right? If you shot it last month, last year, whatever, the specific load you used, the lot number of that load, the rifle you used it in, barrel length of that rifle. Hornady prints the ammo lot number on the box label right under the advertised ballistics of that particular load. Like I said, I'm digging into this stuff in more detail. I greatly appreciate any more assistance you can provide. Now, this sort of situation also has made me wonder, too, how often do things like this happen and just nobody notices? Now, the 7PRC is kind of a special case, like I mentioned, where it's a high-profile cartridge that's using a very specialized, very high-performance powder to get that high performance that the cartridge is giving. And if that powder goes away, then that really hamstrings the performance of the cartridge. But say like with these previous ammo shortages that we've gone through here very recently or 10 years ago, like in 2012, 13, 14, I often wonder how often a company just wasn't able to get their favorite powder for a specific ammo loading, and they had to use something else that was giving, less performance than they wanted in one area or another, right? It wasn't as fast, it wasn't as consistent, whatever, and maybe it was just something that didn't get noticed or wasn't a big enough problem that no one really got upset about it. My dad has been a hand loader as long as I've known him. He would always chronograph his hand loads, but I don't know that he ever chronographed any factory loads. And I know that a lot of guys that were factory ammo shooters for a long time didn't chronograph their factory loads unless they were just curious. But as long-range precision shooting has become more and more popular, knowing that exact velocity that your ammo is shooting at becomes more and more important. 100 feet per second difference in that can make a giant change in your point of impact at 700-800 yards, that sort of thing. So a lot more people now are chronographing their ammo than was the case even 10 or 20 years ago. So a big part of me thinks that this is not the first time this has happened. I'd bet a lot of money. This is not the first time that it has happened. It is only because the 7PRC is such a high profile and high performance cartridge that one, people are noticing, and two, that people are getting really upset about it. So like I said, it's frustrating. I wish it weren't happening, but I'm working on some stuff, and I'm going to get back to you as soon as I can with some answers for you. Now, as we wrap up, I will be posting a photo of the Blessbuck I just shot with my 7PRC on Instagram. Comment on that post, tag a friend for additional entries in the drawing for the anniversary giveaway. Same thing with Patreon. Make sure you're supporting me there. Free and paying members do get additional entries in the ongoing anniversary giveaway too. but paying members will get to see video from that hunt in my upcoming Patreon post, as well as those other photos I mentioned talking about the terminal effects of this ammo. So make sure you are supporting me on Patreon if you want to see that video and see the details of what that ELDX did to this Blessbach at 50 yards. Finally, click that link in the show notes to enter the Big Game Hunting Podcast giveaway for a chance at winning one of the other great prizes I am giving away. Remember, you can make your dream hunt turn into a reality, and we can help. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next time on the Big Game Hunting Podcast.
This show may be over, but we have plenty more for you on our website. For more information on today's topic, as well as lots of other useful hunting resources, head over to the BigGameHuntingBlog.com. We look forward to having you back for the next episode. But until then, happy hunting.
When you work in tech at Cox, you get to do meaningful work every day. You get to be the biker who codes as fast as he rides, crafting advanced tech solutions that transform car buying, or a guitarist who develops harmonious apps and websites, connecting people to people and businesses, all in real time. A savvy soccer mom running solution sets as passionately as she runs gameplays. Be the super secret keeper, designing cybersecurity systems to protect private data and websites. A planet protector, expanding EV battery life and inventing more ways to build a better future for all. When you work in tech at Cox, you get to do career-defining work that solves the greatest problems of our time. Join us and connect to work that improves lives, including yours. Learn more about our family of businesses at cox.career/tech.